Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. So we're back. It's the end of June. We're in the almost the dog days of summer. I think the dog days of summer officially start with about the MLB All-Star game. That's roughly the dog days, but we're certainly feeling it. And I was telling Mike beforehand that I found that the best way to avoid 95 to 100 degree temperatures is to just go to Seattle for a week. So that's what I did last week while it was like 100 degrees here. Um, Pour one out for my wife who had to stay back, but was down to a cold 87 degrees today. Not here, it wasn't. If it wasn't for, I actually have a in-room air conditioner for the office here, and if I did not have that, it would legitimately be about 92 degrees in my office. So a little portable air conditioner right down here, and it works well. It works well in conjunction with the HVAC. You might say, we'll just get a better HVAC system. I know. I actually had this computer off. I had the main PC off with all the lights, all the monitors, all the everything, and the room was a good 10 degrees cooler. The air conditioner actually was good enough for this room when it doesn't have to compete with basically a space heater plus like half a dozen monitors. Which, lesson
Half a
learned.
dozen?
What's that?
You mean half a dozen?
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 monitors, and I've got a sixth one for my laptop back there for work. So I actually have 6 monitors going at any point in time in this room.
I thought I got,
I mean, you've got a TV.
well, yeah, that's for Switch 2 exclusively. It's just a perk I got.
Kevin is still running CRTs. That would be funny. Actually, so I knew a guy. Story time with Kevin. By the way, welcome to Shop Talk. In case this is your
Oh,
first
Shop
time
Talk. We
here,
need to vamp sometime.
yeah, this is kind of what we do at Shop Talk. It's Monday. We're just having a little chat after work and enjoying an hour. If you have any technical questions, SQL Server related, data platform related, drop them in chat. That's ostensibly what we're about. But in the meantime, I don't know. I'm probably going to rant a little bit. I'm going to vamp quite a bit, and Mike's just going to like wander off camera every once in a while because that's what we do. It's what we do. Speaking of which, the one and only Mike Christensen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. And I would like to say to the group and to you, we have an agenda, but I would like to query you in the group. You give me some advice, but like, I don't know if there's like a show called there's a this is a show where you like lose a ton of weight really quickly. Um,
Biggest
what
loser?
was it? Yeah, Biggest Loser. I need that for Power BI, so we can talk about that. I know you gave me one or two names, but like I need that for Power BI ASAP because I've been doing Power BI like 70 hours in a row and making some big mistakes correcting them. So we like if there's time at the end, I would like to get some advice on Power BI because I know Eugene, our friend, uh, uh, friend of the show, he kind of like talks about consulting and stuff, less so like teaching Power BI. So
Yep. So yeah, absolutely. We'll add that. Look at that, folks. We have an agenda item tonight. So look at us. Now, for Andrew's comment about me still running CRTs, back when I worked for the state in Ohio, I there was a guy I worked with who had an issue where LED monitors hurt his eyes. They would give him migraines. He actually had a 30-inch CRT in the year 2012, and that was his primary monitor. I don't know how he was able to get it at that point because CRTs had basically been out of fashion for a decade by then. I'm guessing if he's still working, which thinking about the age, he might be right around that age, but he may still have this giant CRT monitor hanging around 20 years in because he just couldn't work with regular LED screens. They have to
what's it?
cut a
What?
hole in the wall for the forklift. It was huge. It was a huge monitor. He had a pretty big desk. He was high enough up in the organization.
So CRT cathode ray tube.
Yep.
So the depth is very almost proportional to the width.
Yes,
So you're saying that somebody had a cathode ray tube in 20, did you say 2012?
it was about 2012 when I left the state agency. So he did have one then. It was either a 27 or a 30-inch CRT. It was a big boy.
Well, they draw a lot of energy too, and the bulbs die.
Yep,
Anyway,
yep. So I haven't kept up with him since I left the state. So who knows? Maybe newer monitors worked a little bit better for him or something. But I know at that time there was something weird about the refresh rate of LEDs that just gave him migraines. So
is Dayton near Columbus?
Dayton is 90 miles west of Columbus.
All right, well, I got some connections in Columbus, so maybe we can figure this out.
So do I. Um, I left two 21-inch CRTs in the basement office in Iowa when I moved to North Carolina. Yeah, at this point they're just ballast.
Yeah, they have a lot of bad chemicals in them too.
That they do. They're not particularly great, but at the time, pretty awesome. The fact that they worked. Nowadays, no, I'm much happier. Like for example, my monitor up here, if that was a CRT, that would be precariously perched, considering the angle that it's at and the height that it's right above my head. Would not have a CRT hanging at an angle right over my head.
It's a weapon. It's a weapon
0 out of 10 would not recommend.
It's a weapon at that point.
It's the sword of Damocles. It's the monitor of Damocles.
Yes.
So, all right. We actually do have real items to discuss, surprisingly enough. So, I probably should get to some of those real items of discussion, I suppose. So, let me go ahead and do the thing that I normally do, which is share my screen. And we've got, first up on the list, 8KB. 8KB is run by two people I used to work with and one person I've never worked with, but gave me enough good advice to get me a really nice recording gig in terms of my setup, not in terms of a job, but the microphone, the preamp, all the other stuff. I basically just cribbed his notes. Mark Wilkinson, Andrew Prusky, Anthony Nocentino, the brain trust behind 8KB. They are back for another year. August 21st is the day. And the website, in case you have not been there in a while, 8kb.online. 8KB is a free, very high, in-depth. Actually, think of it as, and they call it SQL Server Internals Conference. I'm trying not to use the term internals because they've pivoted a little bit from must be SQL Server internals to more of must be 400 or 500 level content. And that's what they really specialize in. So it only comes around once in a while, once a year or so. And it's one day. You can see that there are a few sessions. All of them are 400 or 500 level. And it should be kind of interesting. And it is also free. That's the big thing. So August 21st, you can sign up for it. You can register. You can see who 8KB is. Marsha Pierce is also involved with 8KB now. I've neither worked with her nor has she provided me fantastic advice on how to set up a recording setup, but that's okay. She's still on the list as well. Maybe I'll email her and be like, Marsha, in order to remain a member of 8KB, you must provide me some relevant information on a topic of my choosing. And
So,
we'll see if she goes for that.
So who was the young man at SQL Saturday? It was Andrew, right?
Andrew Prusky was not at our SQL Saturday. No, he was in New York City. He's out of Ireland.
Can you go back to the sponsors?
So Mark Wilkinson
That was who I met. One of your former colleagues.
Yes, yeah. Mark was there. He was in charge of the SQL clinic.
Correct. Yeah. So when he told me that he was involved in 8KB, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like a celebrity!" And I think he turned red a little bit. I was like, he thought, like he was like, "Well, it's not that big a deal," and I was like, "No, it is a big deal." Someone else was like, "What is 8KB?" And I was like, "Well, it's one page in the database." Like then I was like, "Ask him." So I think we should all support this. I'm in. I'm going. I'm going. I can't present. I don't have that 400 level skill, but I'm going.
And that's fair, perfectly fair. It is again a free conference, free registration. It's all online, so you don't have to go anywhere. You can watch it in the confines of whatever room or office you're in at that point in time. You can even put it on a phone and walk around. Pretend like you're really important, that you're taking business calls when actually you're listening to next gen high availability with contained availability groups. But you'll make it sound like you're a real power player. And when you're ordering your lunch, you're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Chipotle person. I can't give you my order. I can't tell you that I want the black beans because I'm too busy making deals."
I'm making
So
deals. The database.
exactly, and they're not going to be able to hear it. So as long as you keep the volume just low enough so that you can hear that there's something going on, and you're just like, "No, I told you on the 7th. It's got to be the 7th." And then, "Oh, I'll take the black beans, please." So you can work that out. This is pro advice, how to make it look like that you're a real mover in the world to the person who is fulfilling your fast food order. Important things, important life lessons that you can only get if you sign up for 8KB. So that was item number one. Item number one on the list. Surprisingly, took longer than I thought it would, but that's okay. I prefer that. I prefer that things take a little bit longer than I thought because that means that I'm not going to run out of content quite as quickly. But number two, we're gonna get a little dive into, and this is from Curated SQL. Curated SQL is a blog that yours truly has been keeping up to snuff for the last decade. We are almost at 10 years of Curated SQL, so we're pretty close. It'll be 10 years in November, and
There's going to be a party, a virtual party on MySpace to celebrate your actual attention.
MySpace was dead by 2015, so we're not going to do it there. We may do it on Dig.
That was the joke.
I know. I was trying to think of a network like Google Plus.
Yeah,
We're going to do it on Google Plus. But there was a post that I linked to from Kevin Hill talking about the different editions of SQL Server, and I think Kevin's post on the whole was pretty solid. I will link to Kevin's post. It was solid enough that I decided to link to it here. But there was a comment that was in that Eric Darling left. Very intelligent man, Eric Darling. Man of the internet, Eric Darling. And
very skilled. Very skilled.
he mentioned, hey, 128 gigs for the SQL engine is wrong. So if we look, SQL Server standard, max memory usage, 128 gigabytes for the SQL engine, that is wrong. So Eric is correct. This is wrong. And to understand better what the differences are in additions, let me drop in this link to Microsoft Learn, because this will give you an idea. And a lot of this is coming about because in SQL Server 2025, we're finally going to get a standard developer edition or developer standard. I forget which order of the words they are, but basically up to this point, developer edition has been interchangeable with enterprise edition. It is all of the same functionality of enterprise edition, except obviously there's no licensing. You can't put it in production. If you did put it in production, you'd get your hand slapped, possibly worse. But basically, it is all of the functionality of enterprise. The downside is if you're running developer edition in your dev environment, your QA environment, your staging environment, and then you run standard edition in production, well, that means you could have functionality that works just fine in dev, QA, staging. When you go to production, no longer works because, that feature's not available to you. And to this point, this is about 20 years overdue. You're absolutely right, Andrews. It's something that people have been complaining about for literally decades. Since 2005 at least.
20 years is 2 decades. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, so since SQL Server 2005, I think that was the first time I heard people complaining about why is Why is there no standard version of Developer Edition? And that was back when you had to pay for Developer Edition. Nowadays, you don't have to pay for it. But basically, the one of the points that I'm driving at is you didn't really have a great answer. You could, if you had an enterprise agreement with software assurance. My understanding is, and I'm not a licensing expert, my understanding was that you could put standard edition in lower environments and not need to license it. However, if you did not have an enterprise agreement with software assurance on those boxes where you would be putting standard edition, you would have to license it even if it wasn't for production. So not great. That was the whole point of Developer Edition. That Developer Edition, you did not need to have a special license as of about 8 years ago when it became free. And so you could put that on any box anywhere, not have to worry about licensing issues. Whereas if you wanted standard across the board, you needed EA with software assurance, is my understanding. Again, that's something where I could very well be wrong on. So do not take that to the bank. Talk to somebody who actually does licensing for a living, and they're probably going to give you just as confusing of an answer. But it's the way the world works.
Well, if you have 3 more hours, we can talk about bronze, silver, and gold medallions and fabric. I'm sorry, 10 more hours.
Yeah, the medallion architecture isn't that difficult to understand.
Okay.
But
if you're Kevin,
we can talk about it, Mike.
That's next shop talk. Medallion.
I can give you the 5-minute version, so we may have to do that after Power BI. Licensing is easy, Andrew says. Call until you get an answer you like, then get it in writing. Getting it in writing is harder than it sounds.
Yeah, Bill Gates is retired. He doesn't write letters anymore.
Well, it's not. It'd be more of you find a licensing person, an account manager who's actually willing to write it down, because half the account managers don't know it either. They say something, and it turns out that's not right either. Licensing is hard. SQL Server licensing is absolutely not a trivial endeavor. Oracle licensing is easy. Basically, it's how much money do you have? Keep giving us money. When you run out, go to your bank, get more money, and then give it to us. That's Oracle licensing. It's easy. IBM licensing is basically a flow chart that's 25 pages long. All of the routes of the flow chart basically go toward you need to pay us more money. Was that Oracle or Azure? Well, Azure licensing is simple. It's, do you like performance? Just turn this knob. Performance is easy. Just turn the knob. Pay us more money. You'll get marginally better performance. Unless it goes down. But that's another story. We don't have any such stories on this week's agenda, although, Shop Talk, we're always about finding cloud failures and pointing and laughing. But
this is apropos, and I know you're doing a transition, but we're talking here at Duke. I joined the group in 2018 because we were going to switch from Oracle to SQL Server, and then now it's hot and heavy. We're doing it, and also we're talking about how queries need to be performant, because as we move to the cloud, your queries are going to cost money, right? And so all the things that we talk about here in this group about performance and about execution plans and sargeable arguments and order buys, etc. Those are all going to be very apropos for our group as we continue in the future, because it's coming up more and more. Like, we're not going to be necessarily all on-prem. You can't have these costly queries because they will have an impact on the bottom line. So,
yeah, that is one of the nice things about being in the cloud is you actually have a business justification to do the backlog operations. So you shouldn't have costly queries on-prem either. You shouldn't. However, getting a product owner or a product manager to give you the time to fix a lot of those queries can be like pulling teeth. Well, we have all these other things, these business priorities that need to happen first. And that's how you end up with an enormous amount of technical debt. You have query problems, etc. At some point, if you have enough force of will or enough cachet within the organization, you can push your way into I'm going to make time for this. And we can always talk about substitution operations where it's going to take me 2 days to do this work when really it's going to take me 4 hours, but that'll give me a day and a half to fix some things that I need to get fixed. But if you have a hard PM, somebody who is really trying to push the team to its limit, that's where you get stuck with a lot of, it's just really crappy code, but I can't go back and fix it because I don't have the time because I'm too busy doing these other things. And we're adding more stuff that's piling on top of the bad stuff that's already there. And, there's also the difficulty of, let's say that you do I'll give you a week. What's the business impact? How much money are you going to save us? Are we not going to buy new hardware next year? Well, no, of course, we're still going to buy new hardware next year because we still need the hardware. There's still, everything's priced in terms of 3 to 5 year capital expenditures for amortization purposes. So you're not going to save there. You're not actually saving any money anyplace. It's more of potentially delaying a purchase, except that hardware is still on an amortization cycle. So, you're not going to say, I've tuned so many queries. Let's not buy that new server this year. Let's hold off 2 more years to buy the new server, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like, I guess I'm trying to struggle to find the appropriate analogy that is basically, we're never going to say no to hardware. So on-prem becomes very difficult to justify. The major justification is if you're already at limits and you can't afford to get that new hardware right now, then you can have your marginal improvement be sufficient enough to justify even a program manager or a project manager or a product owner or whatever you want to call them these days, having that person say, okay, we'll prioritize making queries faster. So that becomes a real challenge in a lot of teams. Whereas in the cloud, you can say, hey, if we fix these queries, we can scale down this server. We can actually save this much money. If we do these things, we can switch to this mechanism that requires a lot less operation, so we can save this many thousands of dollars per year. And now you actually have something to compare against. You have a return on investment. 3,000 CSR is able to process 2 more policies each per day. Was easy to get time to optimize. Yeah, if you have a specific, I can get this type of improvement, that's great. But again, that requires you have to be able to express it in terms of return on investment. And if you're able to do so, then you can typically find a way to get that onto a sprint. The bigger challenge is, in a lot of cases, we don't have a way to justify it. Like, the server goes from 84% to 74% or 64% or 54% utilization. Is that stopping users from accessing our site when it's 84%? No, it might be slower. They may be more annoyed, but it's not really doing much. Versus 54% where, okay, is it faster? Yeah, but are they doing more? Maybe not. So it all becomes a challenge. Anyhow, going back to the original point, additions, SQL Server 2022. So this also applies to prior versions of SQL Server as well. And we have a few different editions. The ones that we actually care about: Enterprise Edition, Standard Edition, Developer Edition, sometimes Express. But I'm going to focus here on Standard Edition, because that is the thing that people misunderstand the most around what is actually available and allowable. So looking at this standard edition, you get 4 sockets or 24 cores, the lesser of. Now, obviously, you have to license up to 24 cores. So you can't get 24 cores if you only licensed 12 cores. Kind of a no duh, but just got to say it out loud. Where this becomes important is if you have a systems administrator who loves to set up virtual machines where you have one virtual socket with one virtual core and you have 24 of those, SQL Server will say, oh, okay, well, I can use 4 sockets, which gives me 4 cores, and the other 20 I can't use because I'm not allowed to use those. That's also a really, really weird design. I mean, I guess it makes sense if you're running a bunch of onesie-twosie boxes, but once you start talking about 24 cores, it doesn't make sense to have 24 virtual sockets.
Not if their objective is database and SQL Server.
Yeah, it should not. 1 vCPU per socket instead of 16 in one socket. Yeah, exactly, Ben. This kind of stuff does happen, and it can be a problem. It can be a performance problem that people don't realize for a little while. Like, well, I paid for 24 cores. Why is it not actually doing 24 cores worth of work? Why are 20 of these cores sitting idle? And the answer is because you have 1 core per socket, 1 vCPU per socket. So something to keep in mind if you are using standard. Now, this is where the 128 gigs comes from. Maximum memory for the buffer pool. So this is not for the SQL engine as a whole. Why do I say that? Because if we scroll down a little bit, column store, 32 gigs of memory. That is in addition to the 128. In-memory OLTP, 32 gigs in addition. Analysis services, you have here reporting services, but the buffer pool, this is the buffer pool, is 128 gigs. In addition to that 128 gigs, you will still have other bits of memory that SQL Server uses. So SQL Server's memory utilization is more than just the buffer pool.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. And
sorry, I'm like those 2 guys in the Muppets, like in the old
Statler and Waldorf, my spirit
Statler
animals.
and Waldorf. Yeah, it is. It's way more than that.
Waldorf is my homeboy, but that's all right. So in a regular SQL Server instance, let's say you have no column store, you have no in-memory OLTP, you will still have more than 128 gigabytes of memory used if you max out the buffer pool. And granted, it's not going to be like 300 gigs or anything. It'll be closer to, call it 135, 136 gigs. That's spitballing a number, by the way. But it is more than just 128 gigs. That is not the limit of the SQL engine. In addition to 64 more gigabytes if you're using column store and in-memory OLTP. So NanoDB asks, standard edition 128 gig buffer pool for how many years now? At least since SQL Server 2005, I think. I don't think they've increased the number.
Really?
You know what?
Serious? Are you serious?
Let's go back. Now I can only go back to 2016, and I know
go to 2003, our favorite edition.
2000, the edition that didn't exist, but people put on their resume.
That's the trick resume. Yeah,
I love that. Actually, I had a resume that I reviewed when I was a manager where somebody actually put down their experience in SQL Server 2003. And I was about to say, I want to bring this person in on a call just so I could ask, tell me all about your experiences with SQL Server 2003. I'd love to hear all about this.
Yeah.
And by the way, in case you did not know, there actually was a pirated version of SQL Server 2003 floating around. It was SQL Server 2000 where the splash screen was reskinned to say 2003. So somebody had actually put that together and was selling it as Microsoft SQL Server 2003. And that's because there was that big 5-year gap between versions of SQL Server. So kind of felt like, hey, shouldn't there be a new version by now? Oh, 2003. Let's go buy that and some sketchy store and pick a location, a flea market somewhere.
Shop Talk, you're coming for the greatest hits because I know Kevin's weaknesses.
There are many of them. Okay, you know what? Anders might be right. So the Hong Kong special. First thing I was thinking was Vietnam, actually, Anders, but similar idea. So 2005, the buffer pool looks like. Ooh, wonderful. Steve Stedman has a blog post on it. Good. Here is Steve Stedman's blog post on SQL Server memory limits over time.
All right,
SQL
so
Server
can I
20.
ask you? So can I want to play the novice role. So like when you're saying like one instance, one licensed instance, like
One,
so it do.
yeah.
So yeah, sorry.
Yeah, one licensed instance of SQL Server. And mind you, when Steve here says support for memory, this is, again, the buffer pool. This is not all memory. So 128 gigabytes for the buffer pool. But then the whole point of Eric's comment was there is more to SQL Server's memory usage than just the buffer pool.
Right.
If you're not using column store or in-memory OLTP, this is 90-something% of your memory utilization, most likely. But there is still more. There is still stuff that can happen outside of the buffer pool that SQL Server can still take advantage of, even in Standard Edition. But you can see here, it did increase to 128 for SQL Server 2014. Prior to that, it was 64. It was 32 gigs up to SQL Server 2008. And it was 2 gigs
you
in
froze.
2000.
But you froze for a second.
Uh-oh. I mean, I have no dropped frames, but it looks like
maybe you froze for a second on my end.
Well, hopefully, we can see that this was a pretty significant change over time. 2005 was a huge change. It went from 2 gigs to 32 gigs, and then 64
to 126.
Yeah, 128, and then it's been 128 for the last decade. Now that
doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it does make sense. 2000 was only a 32-bit release. Yeah, correct. And if you wanted 3 gigs, you had to use the what was it, AWE flag to allow you to get 3 gigabytes of RAM available.
Who wrote that? Is that I'm not on Twitch.
This is from Steve Stedman.
Okay. Oh, right. No, I thought you said that. I thought you got a text on Twitch.
No. So yeah, the big change, obviously, until about 2014, Standard Edition was roughly keeping up with servers because you had in 2008, SQL Server 2008 comes out. I would say that your average server in a medium-sized company for SQL Server was probably going to have about 8 to 16 gigs of RAM. So Standard Edition is saying, we'll give you 32. That's pretty good. 2008 R2 going up to 64 gigs of RAM. So 2010, you're starting to get more memory on boxes. It's easier to get more RAM. Price of RAM is decreasing. Quality of RAM is increasing. And yet another jump in 2014. But I think the reason why we're not seeing additional increases over the last decade is so that there's still a differentiation with Enterprise Edition. Ever since SQL Server 2016 SP1, there are relatively few ways to differentiate Standard Edition from Enterprise Edition in terms of why would I pay 3.5 to 4 times as much money for Enterprise Edition. For a lot of companies, as much as I am loath to admit it, I am definitely an Enterprise Edition snob. So I hate having to say I've helped several companies downgrade from Enterprise to Standard Edition because it just saves a lot of money. And the only thing that I can really say, you're going to miss this, is online index rebuilds. or online index creation to begin with. There really aren't that many other things. I mean, partitioning, yes, but then if you want partitioning to work well, you kind of have to have a DBA there full time so that they can understand and troubleshoot these sorts of partitioning issues. Not the type of thing that your average small to medium company is going to care about. Um, Otherwise, there are a few features, but most of those features aren't going to hit it for a lot of the customers. They're really kind of okay with standard edition. The only thing that might hit you is I was working with one customer where they had 200 and something gigs of RAM on the box, but could only use 128 gigs of it because they're in standard edition. They didn't really need enterprise edition. They did need some more efficient queries, some slightly better design, some appropriate indexing, but otherwise, yeah, they didn't need 200 gigs of RAM, and they had multiple terabytes worth of data that they processed and worked with a good amount in a warehousing scenario. Still could get away with it with 128 gigs. If you gave them a 256 gig buffer pool, there'd be even less reason to think about enterprise edition. As it is now, like, I need 256 gigs of buffer pool. Well, you could, to Mike's point, you could have multiple named instances. So you could have multiple instances, multiple VMs, multiple installations of SQL Server, and spread your data out that way. Then you get around the limitations of, you only get 128 gigs in your buffer pool. But even then, in a lot of cases, you don't necessarily need a lot more. But when you do, okay, pay us 3.5 times as much. There aren't too many other great value propositions for Enterprise Edition, at least at the level that I typically deal with. There's nothing from a surface area for software development. Any development feature is in every edition of SQL Server since SQL Server 2016 SP1. That was the big switch. That was the thank you, Microsoft, you've made all of our lives so much better moment. But then in a decade on, there's zero pressure from me on the development side to say, why would you pay for enterprise? From the administrative side, there are a couple of things. Basically, it's buffer pool size and it's online index building. Otherwise, not a whole lot. So that was the quick thing about the different editions of SQL Server, and specifically that standard edition, it is not limited to 128 gigs of the engine. It is buffer pool per instance. There are some other things you can see actually. Yeah, basically the buffer pool, these are the pages of data that are stored in memory. They have to be read into memory before they can be sent off as part of a query. So it has to be in the buffer pool, and you page things into and out of disk or into and out of memory based off of how large your database is, how many pages you have, and how frequently those pages get used. So there are a few other things where, hey, if you want multi-database availability groups, if you want versus the basic availability group, if you want contained availability groups, or I mentioned online index rebuilds, there are some things hot adding memory and CPU so that you don't need to reboot. This is pretty neat. That is a pretty neat feature if you are in an enterprise environment, of being able to say, yeah, you need 64 gigs more RAM. You got 64 gigs more RAM. Have fun. Instead of, well, we're going to have to schedule it. You'll have a reboot. We're going to do that on the weekend and yada, yada. It's there. So that's a pretty neat feature. But again, most of the stuff is administrative in nature and tends not to affect most those of us who are more on the development side. Online index rebuild, especially column store, that is also a pretty big deal. Um, Column store indexes do need rebuilt every once in a while, so it is good to have them. Transparent data encryption, you actually do get that in standard edition, Anders. I had to double check to make sure. That's fairly recent. That was not always the case, but you do get TDE in standard edition now. Wonder if that changed in SP1. That might have been a 2016 SP1 change, because I remember originally it was not available, and so not everything is going to be available in standard edition, but for the most part, a lot of it is. So yeah, that's the note on additions and supported features. Now there are a couple of other things that Mala mentioned that she was going to talk about had she been able to make it tonight, but because she's not here, Mike has a question about Power BI. So let's talk Power BI.
All right. Let me make sure I am on Cadillac. Can you guys hear me?
You are coming in loud and or clear.
All right. So I've been a member of TriPass since 2018, and then Duke has been a big Tableau shop, which a lot of organizations have been. We're transitioning to SQL Server, which you guys have heard me talk ad nauseum about. I have gotten pulled into some projects that I have been doing for Power BI. So I effectively have become more of a hardcore programmer. Most of my career, I did dashboards and accounting and analytics and learned SQL on the job. But now I kind of am mostly a developer in SQL, and then I don't really do a lot of dashboards. So I'm like jumping back into the dashboard game, and the stakes are high. I'm working on a big project for 55 sites, more than 1,000 providers. It's for respiratory infections for kids. It's a big important project, and I'm doing well so far. But I have been back borrowing and stealing from my friends to make sure I'm doing things correctly, and getting involved in twerpy stuff like visual calculations versus regular calculations. And I think I talked to you, Kevin, about like I need to go to boot camp. Like, what's the boot camp for Power BI? Because if there's a Brent Ozar for Power BI, I'm all in because I need it.
All right. The boot camp for Power BI is these guys. The
SQL
Italians,
BI.
the Italians Plus.
I seen one of these guys on YouTube.
Yes.
The far left guy.
Yeah. So Alberto Ferrari on the left, Marco Russo in the middle, Kurt Bueller on the right. Three fantastic guys who are great at this. Now, they happen to have all kinds of videos. They happen to have all kinds of articles. They have books, several books. There is a lot of training. They have a couple of the fantastic tools on the topic, Tabular Editor and DAX Studio, two excellent tools. This is the starting point for me for basically anything Power BI related. Marco and Alberto have been doing this since Analysis Services MDX was a going concern. And so they have a lot. Now, they do also have training. So you have some free video courses. You do have paid video courses that obviously you'd have to pay for. But again, you can try out the free trainings, see if you love them, see if their style of teaching really clicks with you. And if so, cool. You might go and look at some of the DAX and data modeling courses. They are more of DAX people. So they're going to be, they will talk to you about visualization. They will talk about some of those concepts. But I think of Marco and Alberto more as people to go to when you want to learn about DAX.
Kevin, you just saved my life because let me tell you. So, like, having been a Tableau guy for a long time, and before that, I learned. I mean, most of my career, I learned amazing quirks uh, about Excel, and I could do all kinds of crazy stuff there. But like, I quickly was able to do a lot of visualizations. But I'll give you one example, Kevin. So let's just say you have, for my Duke project, I have 55 sites that have respiratory infections for kids, right? And so I have, like, let me say an N of 90,000, right? 90,000 encounters over a year. And I want to just do something like, I want to do like, well, here's the average of how many kids got prescribed um, amoxicillin, right? So I can do that, right? And I start filtering it and say, like, well, what if this is the emergency room? But I want to say, here's the emergency room versus the average. So there's some DAX queries that would be like all except X, Y, and Z, right? So I'm very familiar with Excel stuff and SQL stuff, et cetera. But like, so DAX is its own thing, right? So I'm like trying to like make sure that I can be like, well, what if somebody wants to do an average, but they want to see their average versus everybody else, even though there's 9 filters? Well, that's DAX.
Mhm.
That is DAX all day, every day. So I'm in.
So yeah,
I'm already signing up for SQL BI. Trust me right now.
there you go. Now, next person, Megan Longoria. So Megan,
Megan Lagoria.
yeah, Megan's fantastic as well. She has a whole series of presentations on her two focuses nowadays tend to be around visualization and accessibility. And I say focuses, but actually she does also talk a lot about ETL, Azure Data Factory, and the like. But you'll see things like accessible Power BI reports, paginated reports,
Pros.
practical application storytelling techniques, etc. So Megan has quite a few presentations on the topic. She also has a blog that covers a lot of things that she's been working on. So also worth checking out. Um, Third person, this one not directly in the SQL Server world, but I do like her book a lot, and that is Cole Nussbaumer Knaflick. So Cole is author of Storytelling with Data. Storytelling with Data is an excellent book. Highly recommend it. There is also Let's Practice, which is more of a hands-on guide version. So Storytelling with Data is the, you will notice that I purchased the book multiple years ago. This is basically a series of lessons on how to understand audience, how to understand what you're trying to describe, and how best to
Wow.
get that message across to the audience. Let's Practice is her follow up, which is, again, more of an exercise I purchased in
For people like
2021,
us, yeah.
and basically covers real world examples, kind of walking through all of this.
Oh, I'm so happy. This gives me a lot of stuff to work on because I made the deadlines for my Power BI stuff. Also, realizing that like visual calculations are not the same as regular calculations.
Yeah, yeah, and Power BI is obviously it's a big area, and of
It
course,
is, yeah.
I need to shout out. Let me make sure. Yeah. There we go. You guys probably heard half of a yo. I need to pause this so that I don't get a copyright strike because
Well,
Adam and Patrick.
yeah, I watched a couple of his
Yes,
without even talking to you. Yeah.
yeah. So Adam Saxton, Patrick LeBlanc, they're both at Microsoft. Um, you don't have to be bald to be a Power BI expert, but apparently it helps.
Can I say something real quick? Sidebar.
Of course.
So Allison and I were going to Atlanta for my wife's 30th high school reunion, and they've changed a lot of the. I don't know what the billboard rules are, but like most of the billboards are lawyers now. Like you get in an accident or whatever. The best one that we saw out of many was mybaldlawyer.com. And speaking as mostly bald, I was very impressed. I got it.
I'm not
I was.
sure I would trust a bald lawyer.
Why? Why
I'm
not?
thinking, like, if you're not even going to lie about your hair, are you going to lie on my behalf?
I don't think lawyers are supposed to lie for you.
Well, you're obviously not paying them enough.
Because this is why we pay Kevin the big buck, because he's very clever.
All right. So
I found him.
100% recommendation for Guy in a Cube. Adam and Patrick do a fantastic job. A lot of short form videos. If you pay a lawyer enough, they'll say anything. Exactly. It's easy. So those guys, fantastic work. If you want to dig in a little bit further, let me see if I can find. See if I can find his book, because Phil Seamark has a book, and Philip or Phil. He is, here we go, beginning DAX. Let me see when this came out, because it may be. Oh yeah, no, it's too old.
Well, that's one thing I've learned too, is that Power BI has gone through some rapid enhancements from, let's say, 2019 to now. Like rapid. Like
Oh, for sure.
Have added so many features. So when I see things that are more than 3 years old, I ignore them.
Yeah. Power BI, basically every couple. Oh shoot. There we go. Good. We're still on the air.
It wasn't me this time.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't you. It was me. I closed the tab and had to say out. Oh shoot, because I meant to close this other tab. But anyhow, shooting aside, Power BI 2-week sprinted its way into major success. If you go and look at any point in time, look at like 6 months earlier, Power BI will have had a lot of changes, a lot of improvements. You're seeing fewer of them today because a lot of the Power BI people are working so much on Microsoft Fabric. But then all of the Fabric stuff, there is no Power BI outside of Fabric.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even understand what you were talking about, because it's all Fabric for us.
Yes, and in the sense that there is no Power BI outside of Fabric. Let me clarify the statement, because that makes it sound like, oh my gosh, you have to have Microsoft Fabric to use Power BI. Not quite, but where I'm comparing this against is something like Azure Data Factory. There is Azure Data Factory. There is Data Factory for Synapse. There is Data Factory for Fabric. Those are three different bits of code. They have a lot of overlap, but they are also mutually exclusive. They are different code bases. KQL in Azure Data Explorer is different from the KQL in Synapse, which is different from the KQL in Log Analytics, which is different from the KQL in Fabric, in real-time intelligence.
That's not KSQL. What is KQL?
KQL is the Kusto query language. This is...
Oh,
yeah.
You've done presentations on Kusto before.
I have, yes. It is Microsoft's language it's like what Splunk has as its language, but basically it's a log analysis language. It is a pretty solid language on the whole. But again, there are multiple copies of that code floating around inside of Microsoft, and that's why you'll see a bit of functionality. Oh, this was added to Azure Data Explorer. Okay, is it available in Synapse? No, nothing's available in Synapse anymore. Is it available in Fabric? No, we're working on it. Is it available in Log Analytics? No, but it probably will be in 4 months. And then something will come out in Fabric. It's like, oh, is that available in ADX? No, it might be available later, because they're different code bases. Power BI doesn't have that. There aren't multiple code bases, and Power BI's red-headed stepchild, Power BI Report Server, does not count. That is an entirely separate product. That they slapped the name Power BI on there. It's not really Power BI.
Well, so to practice at home on my beefy machine, I got Power BI, and I'm able to do some stuff that obviously I can't publish because it's personal. I don't have a license like I do at work, but I think we have a bronze medallion. We're learning everything, but so I can't develop in Tableau anymore because we're sunsetting Tableau over time, right? So I'm working on this dashboard that needs to be distributed to about 55 sites, and we're working on the whole infrastructure, and my colleagues are helping me. I have an app, and that app has an audience, and then I'm giving access to the audience and all that stuff. So I'm working through it, but I definitely need to be more proficient more quickly.
Yeah, that's fair. It's what we do here on Shop Talk. At least we talk about it. So, final question for the night, coming from Enhanced QC, unless there are other questions that come in. But Log Analytics, Synapse, Azure Data Factory, Power BI, Databricks, SQL. What are the problem sets each of these is addressing? It's a very broad question, and I will give you a very broad answer. SQL.
Business intelligence, right? I mean,
they do different things. Let's actually, you know what? I'm going to start at the top. Log Analytics. Log Analytics is Microsoft Azure's solution for, I want to understand what is going on in my applications. I need a logging server. I need a syslog server someplace, and right. I need to have the ability to ingest events into that syslog server. That's what Log Analytics is. It is a big fancy syslog. Synapse.
Can I interrupt you for a sec?
You can.
One of my colleagues that was a big mentor to me, like you are, Glog, Glog.
Mm-hmm.
You heard of that?
Yes.
It's an awful. If you need to open up log files that are gigabytes, Glog is awesome. Anyway.
Yeah. It is nice to have a tool like that because some of those log files can get huge. And if you have to open it up in Notepad, forget about it.
Or any traditional software is not going to be open. A 6 gigabyte text file, you're not going to be able to open that. But Glog, Glog, boom, do it.
Yep.
Open source, boom.
Yeah, there have been other tools where they do streaming log load, or streaming load of a file. So that's the real trick. Like Ultra Edit, if I remember, also did something similar.
Ultra Edit, man. Every time I bring up something cool, you know something better. Ultra Edit.
Well, Ultra Edit is kind of old at this point. I haven't seen anybody use it in a while.
Log is probably old too because I learned about it 6 years ago. So
yeah, that's fair. All right. So Synapse, Azure Synapse Analytics was Microsoft's play at platform as a service business intelligence. So it was going to be, you have everything in one place. You have all of your data movement, all of your data loading, all of your data operations, all of your data ingestion and analysis in that one location. At this point, Synapse is moribund. You will see one update every year, roughly. And that update is, we're now supporting a slightly newer version of Apache Spark. There's no functionality improvement. Just, if you're on Synapse, I don't know. It's a dead end. So don't open anything up new in Synapse. Azure Data Factory is ELT. It is data movement. It is pick up data from one location, push it over to someplace else, drop it in there, and then perform transformations when you reach there. So this is the cloud replacement for some of the functionality that SQL Server Integration Services did, but it is a different mode of operation. Because integration services was ETL, extract data, transform it in memory, load it into new location. Data Factory is very limited on transformation, and transformation is expensive in Data Factory. It is simply, its best use case is pick up data, dump it off someplace else. Power BI is Microsoft's visualization tool. This is data visualization, whether that is dashboards reporting or pixel perfect rendering is report rendering is what they call it. But basically, do you need reports, multi-page reports that somebody could print out? Do you need a dashboard that shows up on a screen someplace? Power BI is your tool for that. Databricks is a different company altogether. So Databricks is a cloud software or platform as a service provider, and their claim to fame is they are the company behind Apache Spark. They are still the primary committers to Apache Spark. They are still the big movers in it. They still have the fastest Spark clusters. You can get Databricks in Azure. You can get it in AWS. You can get it in GCP. So Databricks is primarily around, I need to have distributed data processing available to me. And also various other things, like basically large-scale BI. SQL, if you're talking about SQL Server is relational database. So this is going to be great for transactional processing. This is going to be great for analytical processing, especially in cases where your databases aren't so enormous that you need multiple servers. SQL Server scales up extremely well. It is, frankly, I think it's still Microsoft's best product. So those are the types of problem sets. SQL is all around, I have relational problems. I need either transactional data. I've got a lot of data that's being written, so a lot of short independent writes that I need to track, or analytical processing. I have large-scale reads that I need to operate on. Typically not going to be great at both of those at once. Microsoft Fabric is similar to Databricks. So Databricks, Fabric, and Snowflake are all trying to compete for this cloud warehousing. The name nowadays is modern data warehousing, and I know that upsets some people who hate the fact that the term modern is in the official name, because soon it will be not modern. But neither here nor there problem. In that space, you do have Fabric, you have Databricks, you have Snowflake. Those are three of your major contenders if you're looking at the Azure cloud. You can find other contenders as well in the space, but that's all right. We're over time, so
yeah,
I'm not
my
focus on
pharma buddies are all using Snowflake and really do think it's pretty effective.
Yeah, and so all of those are trying to solve similar problems of warehousing. I have a lot of data. I need to get that data cleaned up. The data is coming from a lot of different sources, heterogeneous sources. It's not all relational data. I need to be able to take this. I need to be able to process it. I need to be able to refine it, enhance it, make it available for different groups of people in my organization. And I need to be able to do so in a way that's trustworthy. This is really what we've been trying to do with warehousing for the last several decades, ever since Kimball and Inman argued about what model to take. And as a result, that's kind of where we're at right now. So we're all just playing along with the current fads of business intelligence. And Lotus Notes for Life. I had a former coworker who was a
WordPerfect.
WordPerfect is awesome, but he was a Lotus Notes expert. He was a Lotus Notes consultant, and to this day, I imagine he would still swear you can build any project in Lotus Notes. Now, could you debug it? Could you get it to work fast? What happens when it fails? Don't ask questions.
It was a GUI. It was, if you were a business person like me, I built a bunch of applications in Lotus, and you nailed it, Kevin. Like I could build applications, but I couldn't debug it. It had a really good GUI, and like you could create a ticket system or many other things. But if you ran into real problems, you're toast.
Yep. And final comment before we wrap up, because we are like 4 minutes over now.
7:05.
Yeah,
we're too much fun with data.
We're way over. Anders has a comment, and we used to be able to do all this with BCP and Excel. If you want my really cynical take, like 80% of it is still BCP and Excel. So with that, we're going to wind things down for tonight. Tomorrow, no meeting. We will have our advanced DBA meeting second Tuesday, so that's going to be not tomorrow, but next Tuesday. After that, the 8th. We will get those posted on Meetup pretty soon. I know it's the end of the month. Tracy usually gets them up right around this time. We will have those up. We'll let you know who's going to be presenting for us this month. We hope to be able to see you at some future TriPass meetings, but until we do, everybody, take care.